The sun was already punishing by 6 a.m. New recruits stood stiffly in formation, sweat trickling down their backs, some blinking away the nerves, others shifting under the weight of too much bravado. Among them stood a small-framed girl in oversized fatigues, her boots slightly scuffed, her face unreadable. Her name tag read, Reynolds. No one really noticed her at first. That was until General Harold Whitmore stepped out from the command office and gave one sweeping look across. The new batch. He stopped when his eyes met hers. A beat of silence. Then, with a smirk tugging at the edge of his mouth, he muttered just loud enough for his aide to hear. Did someone lose their little sister in processing? A few recruits chuckled. Reynolds didn't. She didn't speak. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. That quietness annoyed him more than it should have. "You," he barked, pointing straight at her. "Step forward." She did, calm, silent, her posture perfect. "Name?" "Private First Class Naomi Reynolds, sir." "Where are you from, Reynolds?" "Camden, New Jersey, sir." "Camden," he repeated with an exaggerated wince. "Rough city. What brings a girl like you to a place like this?" She held her gaze steady. "To prove I belong, sir." The smirk vanished. "We'll see about that." Whitmore walked away. With a shake of his head, already filing her under a category in his mind. Too small, too quiet, wrong place. But Naomi didn't need anyone's belief. She had enough fuel in her silence to ignite a war. Naomi Reynolds hadn't always been this. Quiet. As a kid, she used to laugh hard, loud, and free, often with her brother Darnell chasing her on the backyard with a water gun, their mother yelling at them from the kitchen to stop before someone slipped. That was before the fire. Before the gang retribution that took her brother. Before their family apartment in Camden was reduced to char and grief. And before Naomi stopped talking for almost a year. Therapists said it was PTSD. Teachers called it trauma. Her mother simply called it pain. But pain had a strange way of becoming steel in her veins. The more people underestimated her, the sharper her edges became. She joined the junior ROTC program in high school, not to impress colleges, but because it was the only place she could hold a rifle without judgment. It was where silence wasn't. Strange, it was expected. Naomi didn't want to speak. She wanted to act, to train, to aim, to shoot. By the time she graduated, she could strip and reassemble an M4 carbine in 30 seconds. Flat dash blindfolded. And she never missed. But no amount of medals or local competitions prepared her. For the atmosphere at basic training, it wasn't just about skills. It was about perception. And the perception of her was small, female, black, too quiet, too neat, too invisible. Exactly how she liked it. 2 weeks into basic training, the illusions had already begun to die. The confident swagger some recruits brought with them on day one was now buried under bruises, exhaustion, and blistered feet. The Army didn't care if you were homecoming king or a state wrestling champ. It didn't care if your father had served 3 tours in Vietnam or if you'd watched every military movie on Netflix twice. The Army broke you down to build you up, but first, it broke you. And in the middle of that slow, systematic breaking, one name kept quietly rising on the instructor's logs. Reynolds. Naomi had barely spoken more than a handful of words since arriving, but her performance was impossible to ignore. When others dragged through the 5-mile ruck march, Naomi finished in the top 10 twice. During firearm safety drills, she listened more than anyone and had a better grouping than most. She ran with fierce discipline. She shot with unshakable calm. She studied with eerie focus. But what really started turning heads was her ability to make zero excuses ever. One morning, during a brutal endurance exercise called the Pit, the recruits had to crawl, drag, sprint, and roll through mud and gravel under barbed wire while smoke bombs exploded and instructors screamed at full volume. Some vomited, others wept. One recruit passed out from dehydration and had to be carried off by medics. Naomi didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even breathe heavily when she finished. She just stood there, soaked and caked in mud, waiting silently for the next command. Sergeant Lopez watched her with a puzzled expression. He'd seen plenty of recruits push through pain, but Naomi wasn't just pushing, she was flowing through it like she was built for it. It was as if suffering had no emotional hold on her. That scared people more than any display of strength. Later that night, in the instructor's tent, Lopez leaned toward his fellow trainer, Sergeant Quinn, and asked, "You seen Reynolds?" Quinn nodded. "Quiet girl, shoots like a ghost." "She's different," Lopez muttered. "She doesn't flinch, like, at all." "That's not always a good thing," Quinn replied. "Some people go silent because they're about to snap." But Lopez wasn't convinced. Naomi didn't look like she was breaking. She looked like she was waiting. 2 days later, it was time for the first sniper simulation test, a segment most recruits dreaded. The exercise was simple. Locate a hidden target across a vast training field filled with simulated wind shifts, decoy movements, and visual camouflage. Most couldn't hit anything. Others missed wildly. When it was Naomi's turn, she stepped forward with a calmness that felt unnatural. She didn't brag, didn't check her rifle like she needed reassurance. She lay flat on her stomach, adjusted. Her cheek welled to the stock, exhaled, and went completely still. Observers later said it was eerie watching her in that moment. Her breathing vanished. Her hands never twitched. Even the wind seemed to pause for her. She pulled the trigger. Bull's-eye. Then she adjusted. Found the second target through the scope. Bullseye again. The third shot was from a kneeling position, with partial cover. Still a hit. The entire drill lasted under 90 seconds. She didn't miss once. Not even close. General Whitmore, who happened to be walking past during her trial, stopped mid-step and watched the aftermath with a sour expression. "Who is she?" he asked Lopez. "Reynolds," the sergeant answered. "The girl from Camden?" Whitmore asked with a scoff. "HMPH, must have gotten lucky." Lopez said nothing. But that night, he pulled Naomi aside after lights out. "You ever trained before?" he asked her in a low voice outside the barracks. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. "A little, in high school, ROTC. That wasn't just high school level skill," he said, studying her face. "Where'd you learn to breathe like that before shooting?" She looked at the horizon and replied flatly, "Funerals. You learn how to breathe quiet when you've been to too many." Lopez didn't ask more. He didn't need to. That kind of stillness didn't come from training. It came from trauma. The next morning, the bulletin board in the mess hall was updated. Top marks, sniper simulation, Reynolds, Naomi. Below her name were 10 others. The second best score was 12 points behind. It created a quiet ripple across the camp. Some praised her, others whispered, and a few, especially one recruit named Travis from Texas, didn't like it at all. "She probably got a special brief," he muttered at lunch, "or an easier range. She's not even regulation height," another added. Naomi sat nearby, silent. She heard everything, but she never reacted. That somehow angered them more. That night, someone smeared black shoe polish across her cot and dumped protein powder in her boots. Classic rookie hazing. Nothing new. She cleaned it all up wordlessly and went to bed. The next day, during hand-to-hand combat training, recruits were randomly paired. Fate or karma matched Naomi with Travis. He smirked at her. "Hope you're good with a mop, Reynolds, 'cause you're about to eat dirt." "Begin," barked the sergeant. What happened next was both fast and unforgettable. Naomi ducked his swing, used his own arm momentum to flip him over her hip, pinned him in a lock, and forced him to tap out in 8 seconds flat. Silence fell. No celebration. No grin, she let him go, stood up, dusted her knees off, and stepped back into formation. From that day forward, no one messed with her cot again. By the 4th week of training, the recruits had begun to divide, not officially, but emotionally. Some bonded through shared struggle, whispering jokes during mess hall lines or lifting each other during obstacle courses. Others isolated themselves, too proud or too broken to connect. But Naomi Reynolds remained exactly as she had from the beginning, a quiet shadow moving through every drill with robotic precision. She didn't join the card games after lights out. She didn't complain about the food. She didn't even smuggle snacks or letters like others did. But most notably, she didn't talk about herself to anyone. And yet she was always watching. Instructors noticed she had a memory for formations, routines, even subtle personality tells. She knew who hesitated before a sprint, who glanced over their shoulder during stealth drills, who froze up when someone yelled. She absorbed everything, quietly building a tactical map of not just the battlefield, but of the people around her. And then came Hell Day. Every base called it something different, but the premise was universal: a grueling, 24-hour stress simulation designed to mentally and physically break recruits. It included endless terrain navigation, combat obstacle courses in pitch black, sleep deprivation, simulated gunfire, surprise interrogations, and non-stop verbal pressure from every angle. Even before it began, instructors whispered that half the unit wouldn't make it. General Whitmore personally observed the drill. He liked seeing who cracked. It started at 3 a.m. Recruits were pulled from their bunks by sirens, herded into the woods, blindfolded, and forced to find their way back to camp using only a compass and whispered coordinates. For most, it was terrifying. No GPS, no talking, just damp air, tree roots, and panic. Naomi moved like a panther in fog. When others tripped or cried or screamed, she crouched low, counting her steps, navigating by breath and instinct. She emerged from the woods almost 2 hours ahead of the next recruit. Then came the water. Drills dragging weighted packs through muddy pits while being sprayed with freezing water and screamed at by instructors with megaphones. The point was to confuse and exhaust. It worked on most. Naomi pushed forward, shoulders low, grit in her teeth. Her lips moved now, but only to recite something under her breath. No one could hear it clearly, but it was a cadence, maybe a prayer, maybe the last words of someone she once loved. At one point, an instructor tried to break her. "You think silence makes you strong?" he shouted inches from her face. "You think being a ghost means you're elite? You're not elite. You're just invisible. People forget ghosts." She didn't blink, just kept crawling through the mud. "You got a dead stare, Reynolds," he sneered. "Who taught you that, your dead brother?" That made her pause for a split second. One heartbeat, one moment of broken rhythm. Then she kept moving. The instructor actually stepped back, something in her eyes calm but lethal, unsettled, even him. Later that night, after the final phase of Hell Day, the recruits collapsed in silence, too exhausted to even remove their boots. Some cried quietly. Some slept sitting up. Naomi just sat with her back against a tree, watching the stars, her fingers loosely clasped around her dog tags. That's when Lopez approached. He didn't speak for a while, just sat next to her, 2 canteens in hand. He gave her one. "You broke the course record," he said finally. "Did it by more than an hour." She nodded once. "Still not gonna talk?" "I talk," she said softly, "just not often." He tilted his head, studying her. "What drives you, Reynolds?" A long pause. Then, "I had to watch a man bleed out on my brother's chest while the cops waited in the hallway for backup. That night I learned something. By the time help arrives, it's already too late. So now, I don't wait. I prepare." Lopez let that sit for a moment. "I think you're meant for recon, or maybe the sniper program," he said. She looked over. "They don't let people like me in that easily." He smiled faintly. "Let me worry about that." The next morning, the results of Hell Day were posted. 10 recruits had dropped out. 3 were held back for injury. The top 5 were listed. Publicly, Reynolds was number 1. Again, Whitmore frowned at the board and muttered to himself, "Too consistent, no emotion. That's dangerous." But the instructors? They were starting to believe she might be the real thing, and rumors began to spread, not just about her score, but about a letter of recommendation from Sergeant Lopez to the elite Army Sniper Qualification Course, a place few were invited, and even fewer completed, especially not 20-year-old girls from Camden. Naomi sat on the back of the transport truck with her hands folded over her knees. Her rucksack lay beside her, lighter now, but symbolically heavier than ever. She hadn't spoken since leaving base that morning. The transfer was happening. Fast, too fast, some said. Most soldiers went years before even being considered for the Army Sniper School. Some never made it. Others dropped out within the first few weeks. But Naomi's name had traveled faster than anyone expected, lifted by the quiet murmur of instructors and one bold recommendation signed by Sergeant Lopez himself. "You're going to get chewed up in there," a corporal warned as they rode. "It's not just about shooting, it's about surviving." Psych tests, mental manipulation, isolation. The best fall apart in that program. Naomi didn't answer. She just stared forward. In her hands was a folded piece of paper, the invitation letter to the United States Army Sniper School, Fort Benning, Georgia. When she arrived, the energy was different, colder, quieter. There were no enthusiastic welcomes, no team chants or dorm camaraderie. This was where the most elite came to be broken down to their atoms and rebuilt with ice in their veins. Sniper candidates were greeted not by instructors, but by evaluators. The difference was crucial. Instructors taught, evaluators eliminated. The first week was called the Stalk. It tested everything: mental discipline, camouflage, terrain navigation, and patience beyond comprehension. Recruits had to crawl hundreds of yards over thorny grass, bugs, and gravel to get within range of a target without being detected by spotters hidden in towers with high-powered binoculars. If you were seen, even once, you were failed. No second chances. Naomi had never been tested like this. Back in basic, her strength and silence were enough. But here, the silence was a battlefield of its own. Now she had to become the forest. She had to slow her breathing, time her movements with wind gusts, mimic shadows, and control even the twitch of her eyelashes. By day 3, 4 men had dropped out. By day 5, Naomi still hadn't spoken to a single fellow recruit until she met Mick Carlson, a burly, red-bearded Marine transfer who looked like he'd been carved from a tree stump and carried a laugh like thunder. He was as loud as she was quiet, and yet something about Naomi intrigued him. "You ever blink?" he asked one afternoon after they were both forced to sit in full ghillie suits for 7 hours straight in the sun. She didn't turn her head. "Only when it's safe," Carlson grinned. "Gonna remember that one." But despite the light interaction, she never lost focus. During the cold range assessment, where recruits were given real-world sniper setups with no actual firing, just observation and documentation, Naomi's report was flawless. Her math was on point, her angle estimation perfect. Her breath control during trigger squeeze simulated exactly what was required, even without a bullet in the chamber. The evaluators noted one thing: she never blinked more than once every 30 seconds when behind the scope. That was unheard of. Still, not everyone welcomed her progress. One instructor, Master Sergeant Dola, had a reputation for weeding out soft candidates. He believed the role of a sniper wasn't just about shooting. It was about ruthlessness, psychological endurance. He called it being emotionally sterile. "She's a ghost," Dola muttered during a debrief. "But ghosts don't win. Wars, cold blood does." He decided to test her. One night during a blackout exercise, Naomi and 3 others were told to complete a night navigation up through a swampy training ground. She followed every step with the precision of a needle threading itself through darkness. But halfway through, she was pulled aside by Dola. "I want you to stay out here till sunrise," he said coldly. "Let's see how ghosts handle being alone with their own shadows." She didn't argue. She just nodded. The swamp was freezing. Her suit soaked through. Bugs chewed at her skin. The hours stretched. She saw things, floating eyes, shifting branches, memories of a Camden night dripping blood onto a bedroom floor. But she didn't flinch. She whispered to herself a mantra, learned in childhood: breathe in the fear, breathe out the noise. By sunrise, she was still there. Eyes open, scope ready. When she returned, Carlson met her with a nod. "They tried to break you?" "They tried," she said softly. "They failed." By the 6th week, only 8 candidates remained out of 20-2. Naomi was one of them. Then came the final exam: live fire, concealment, and elimination. Each sniper had to infiltrate a live field, find a target and instructor dressed like a hostage taker, and neutralize with a perfect shot while remaining completely undetected by drone and tower surveillance. Some missed the shot, some were spotted and failed. Naomi disappeared into the terrain like she'd never existed. It took her 4 hours of inching forward, using only the slope of the land and tree shadows. She waited an entire hour in one position while the sun burned through her suit. Then, at precisely the right moment, she fired. Direct hit. Nobody saw where the shot came from. In the surveillance footage, the evaluators noted something chilling. She wasn't just hidden, one said. She became the landscape. The final list of graduates was released at a small ceremony with only a few officers present. 7 names were read. Last on the list was Reynolds. Naomi, distinction in camouflage, patience, and scope discipline. General Whitmore was present. He narrowed his eyes as she stepped up, accepted her badge, and saluted. He didn't clap, but Lopez did from the back of the room. Asterisk. The sun hadn't yet risen when Naomi stood at the edge of the transport helicopter, her rifle cradled across her chest like a sleeping child. Everything she'd trained for, everything she'd survived, had led to this, her first live mission. The desert stretched for miles below, a scarred terrain of rocks, wind, and silence. Somewhere in that desolate heat, a warlord named Hafiz al-Maldar was moving weapons across disputed borders, an operation the army couldn't afford to go public with. That's where the snipers came in. Silent, untraceable, denied. If necessary. And Naomi Reynolds was about to become the quietest weapon they'd ever launched. The briefing had been classified and brutal. Infiltrate an enemy zone with minimal cover. Identify the warlord using drone intel and eliminate the target with 0 collateral. A clean shot, 1 chance. No margin for error. She wasn't alone this time. Carlson was on overwatch, perched 2 clicks away on a separate ridge, feeding her satellite readings through comms. Their banter had been minimal since graduation, but their synergy was undeniable. He trusted her judgment more than his own scope. Winds shifting southeast. Carlson's voice crackled in her earpiece. "You've got a 6-second window between drone passes. Move on my mark." Naomi lay flat in a dry gulch, her ghillie suit blending seamlessly into the bay's sands. She moved only when the earth breathed, synchronizing her crawl with wind gusts and distant gunfire. At 0700 hours, she saw him. Al-Maldar stood near a black SUV, flanked by 2 armed guards. He was taller than expected, draped in gray robes, barking orders and pointing at blueprints on a folding table. Through her scope, Naomi could see the tension in his face, the sweat on his brow. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. "Target confirmed," Carlson whispered. "Wind at 4 miles per hour, 1 point left drift." She adjusted the scope. Her breathing slowed. She remembered Camden. She remembered her brother's shirt stained red, the sound of sirens that never came. The officer who told her mother, "We'll do what we can." She exhaled. Then the world went still. Crack. The shot rang like thunder, but only once. Through her scope, she saw the warlord collapse. The guards froze, looking in every direction. But they would never find her, because Naomi was already gone. She moved like a wraith back through the sand, guided by muscle memory and silence. The extraction team found her lying in wait near the coordinates, calm, untouched, and alert. "You good?" Carlson asked as she climbed aboard. She nodded, dusting sand off her sleeve. "Clean kill." The mission was classified, the kill denied by official reports, but the nickname spread anyway. The Ghost from Camden. It started as a whisper in sniper circles, then grew into something more. A legend, a ghost story told among soldiers in foxholes and bunkers. "She doesn't speak much," they'd say. "But if she's watching you, you're already gone." A week later, Naomi sat alone in a steel chair across from General Whitmore. The room was bare, except for a single folder on his desk. "You made headlines," he said, flipping through the mission report. Unofficially. She didn't respond. He closed the folder and leaned forward. "I'll admit, Reynolds, I misjudged you." Her gaze remained still. "I didn't come here to be judged," he smirked. "That's what worries me." He paused, then slid a different folder toward her. This one had no label. "Another mission." He said, "Different region, high-value target, higher risk." Naomi opened the folder. No hesitation. No questions. Just quiet understanding. Whitmore studied her with a strange look, part fear, part admiration. "You're not like the others," he said. "I know," she replied. And then she stood, saluted, and left the room silent as always. In the months that followed, she completed 4 more operations, each more complex than the last. She never missed, never faltered, never asked for anything, not medals, not praise, only the next assignment. Her legend grew. The girl the general rolled his eyes at? She was now the Army's most precise sniper. The jungle air was wet, heavy, and buzzing with life. Naomi Reynolds lay motionless on the forest floor, her body half buried beneath roots and moss, her sniper rifle trained through a gap in the leaves. For 3 days, she hadn't moved more than a few inches. Her rations were down to 1 protein bar and a few sips of tepid water. Her mission? Terminate an international arms broker rumored to be selling next-generation missile systems to rogue states. His name, Viktor Sokolov. This mission was different. There was chatter that Sokolov wasn't just a dealer. He was protected by civilians, his family, workers, children. He operated under the illusion of being a humanitarian in the open, while committing war crimes in the shadows. Naomi's task was clear: end him before the next deal went through. It was day 4 when he finally appeared. Through her scope, she saw him walk out onto the villa's balcony, a phone pressed to his ear. She adjusted the dial slowly, breath perfectly still, body completely silent. The wind was light. Her range was 702 yards. A clean shot, easy, even. She could take it before he even finished his sentence. Then, a little girl stepped into view barefoot, maybe 6 years old, holding a stuffed animal. She ran up to him, tugged on his sleeve, and smiled. Naomi's finger hesitated on the trigger. This wasn't a training exercise. This wasn't a simulation. This was real blood, real consequence. Carlson's voice buzzed in her ear. "Reynolds, visual confirmed. You got the shot?" She didn't answer. "Reynolds, what's going on?" Still silence. Her scope stayed locked on Sokolov. The girl hugged his leg. Sokolov laughed and patted her head. Naomi closed her eyes for 1 full second. She remembered her brother Darnell's laugh. The way he used to lift her like she weighed nothing. The moment she saw him take his last breath on their living room floor, No child should lose their family to violence, even if their family deserved it. She lowered the rifle. Negative. She finally whispered, no shot, civilians in frame. Carlson. Didn't argue, copy. Hours later, she withdrew. Quiet, swift, invisible. Back at base, General Whitmore was waiting. His face was stone. You had him. Why didn't you take the shot? Naomi stood at attention but didn't speak. He slammed a file on the table. We lost a satellite because of your hesitation. That man moved millions in weapons last night. The window's closed. The opportunity is gone. Naomi looked him in the eye for the first time since basic training. I don't shoot children. Sir, no one asked you to, he growled. We asked you to complete the mission. She didn't flinch. Then next time, give me a mission that doesn't ask me to be the bullet and the blame. He stared at her for a long time. You disobeyed orders, he said. I made a decision, she replied. Same thing in the field. You think you're untouchable now? No, sir, she said. I think I'm responsible. There was silence, thick, tense. Then, dismissed. She turned and walked out. Boots steady, spine straight. He never stopped her. 6 months later, Naomi Reynolds submitted her resignation. She didn't leave with fanfare. No press releases. No parades. Just a quiet exit and a return to the city. She once called home, back to Camden. But the city had changed, and so had she. She began teaching self-defense at a local youth center, opened a private range. Trained girls from rough neighborhoods how to shoot, how to focus, how to breathe through pain and pressure. How to survive when the world told them they couldn't. She never told them what she'd done, but they knew. They called her Coach Ghost. Years later, a reporter tracked her down. He asked, "You were one of the Army's most elite snipers. Why?" Walk away? Naomi smiled faintly. Because being the best doesn't mean you shoot every target. Sometimes it means knowing which ones not to. Asterisk, the general who once rolled his eyes at a quiet black girl from Camden. He never forgot her. And the Army? They still tell her story in sniper school, not because she had the best shot, but because she had the courage to lower her rifle. Not every legend is made by a bullet. Some are made by the ones that were never fired.